Harper Vale's boots clicked against the creaking wooden planks of the Red Willow Bridge, her heart hammering as the river rushed beneath her like a drumbeat of warning. She had intended to leave town quietly, to vanish into the winding forest roads beyond the timber-bird hills, but a voice cut through the morning mist, sharp and unyielding. "Not until you face your pain of your bad deeds." Harper froze, her chest tightening. The voice belonged to no one in the town she thought she had escaped, no sheriff, no saloon owner, no neighbor. She scanned the shadowed tree line, the river's gray waters curling around mossy stones, and saw him, a towering Apache warrior stepping silently onto the bridge's worn boards. Sunlight glinted off his long black hair, braided with leather cords and tribal beads, and the glint of turquoise and silver jewelry caught her eye with each deliberate step. He did not speak again, but his presence pressed down on her like a living weight. Harper's fingers dug into the wooden railing as memories she had long tried to suppress clawed back. The Thompson Ranch fire she had provoked, the lies that had humiliated her neighbors, the careless choices that left others' livelihoods in ruin. She had thought she could ride away, that the hills and woods could swallow her mistakes. But he was a reminder that some wrongs could not be outrun. Kael Thunderhearn's eyes dark, piercing, unyielding, locked on her, reading the truths she refused to admit aloud. There was no threat in his stance, only an inevitability that made Harper shiver. She had been clever, manipulative, and bold, yet in his gaze, cleverness was meaningless. Only reckoning mattered. I didn't mean, Harper faltered. Her voice sounded fragile, foreign even to herself. Kael's expression did not soften. The river's current gurgled like a chorus of ghosts, carrying the weight of all the town's whispered grievances and forgotten injuries. She realized that running had never been an option. She had been blind to the chains she had woven herself. Kael stepped closer, each footfall echoing against the timber bridge. His voice, low and steady, cut through the crisp morning air. "The town remembers, Harper Vale. The people remember. And the river carries witness to deeds that cannot be ignored. You will not pass until you face them." Harper's pulse raced. The wooden planks creaked beneath her as if protesting her indecision. She had avoided this confrontation for months, riding the winding forest trails, hiding in cabins at the edge of town, pretending to be someone else. But Kael had found her, and he would not relent. She tightened her grip on the leather strap of her satchel, feeling the weight of the town's secrets, of lies she had told to protect herself. The creek behind the bridge whispered, and Harper shivered as if the trees themselves had heard her misdeeds and now conspired to trap her. "I can fix it. I can make it right," she said, her voice trembling as she stared at the rushing water. I'll pay them back. Kael raised his hand, halting her desperate pleas. "Actions speak, Harper Vale. Words cannot cleanse the past. You must confront the pain you caused, not just flee it." His gaze swept over her, steady and unflinching. "Until then, your journey ends here." The mist over the river thickened, curling around the bridge and the trees like silent spectators. Harper felt the full weight of her choices pressing down, the cold grip of truth that could not be avoided. The town she had tried to leave, the lives she had disrupted, the woman she had pretended to be, all were waiting for her reckoning. Harper swallowed hard, tasting the sharp tang of fear and uncertainty. The forest beyond the river seemed endless, yet she knew that no trail could hide her from herself, nor from Kael Thunderhearn. His shadow stretched long across the boards, a herald of judgment and inevitable confrontation. She drew a shuddering breath and looked at him, understanding for the first time that this was not a threat, it was fate. And the path ahead, tangled with guilt and regret, was hers alone to walk. Harper Vale could not leave. Not yet. Harper Vale's hands trembled as she gripped the railing of the bridge. her eyes flicking from the rushing river to Kael Thunderhorn's unwavering gaze. The mist hung heavy in the air, curling around the timber and creeping through the forest like a living thing. She had hoped to outrun her past, but now it seemed the past had taken flesh and stood before her. Immovable and unforgiving, Kael stepped closer, his bare chest catching the pale morning light, muscles taut beneath smooth, sun-darkened skin. The silver and turquoise jewelry at his wrists and neck gleamed faintly as he moved. His eyes, dark and unblinking, held her in place, a quiet judgment that Harper could neither escape nor defy. "You don't understand," Harper said, her voice tight, almost cracking. "I never meant to hurt anyone." "The fire," she swallowed. "It was an accident." Kael shook his head slowly, the beads in his hair catching the sunlight. "Accident or not, lives were lost, Harper Vale. Actions are measured by consequences, not intentions. You ran from them. Now you must face them." Harper's gaze dropped to the river, water churning over mossy stones. The town of Red Willow lay a mile upstream, its timber-bird rooftops and dusty streets bathed in morning light. She had walked its streets with a confident smile, thinking herself untouchable. She had lied, cheated, and left chaos behind her, and yet here she was, confronted by a man who seemed less human and more conscience-made flesh. I don't know if I can," she whispered, a lump in her throat. "People will hate me. They'll never forgive me." Kael's voice was steady, soft, yet carried the weight of inevitability. "Forgiveness is not for you to demand. Redemption is not a gift. You must earn it. Start by facing those you wronged, and you will know whether forgiveness is possible." Harper swallowed hard, feeling the grit of regret settling into her chest. She thought of old Mrs. Delaney, whose barn had burned while Harper delayed calling for help. She thought of Jeb Thompson, who had lost half his livestock, staring at the ruins with quiet despair. And she remembered the whispers behind her back, neighbors shaking their heads as if she were some specter of misfortune. All those memories surged forward like a tidal wave, leaving her trembling. Kael's gaze softened just slightly, enough for Harper to see that his judgment was not cruelty, it was clarity. "You will walk back into the town," he said. "Face them. Speak the truth. Show the courage to stand in the consequences of your deeds. Only then will you be free to move forward." Harper shook her head. "And if they hate me? What if they refuse to listen?" "What if? Then you endure," Kael interrupted, firm but not unkind. "Endurance is part of the path. Running has never solved anything." The wind rustled through the tall pines surrounding the river, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine sap. Harper closed her eyes, trying to steady her racing heart. She had been clever, resourceful, even fearless at times, but this was a different kind of courage, the kind that demanded more than quick thinking or survival skills. This courage required honesty, humility, and the willingness to stand naked before judgment. Finally, Harper opened her eyes and met Kael's stare. "All right," she said, her voice low but determined. "I'll go back. I'll face them. But I need you to stay here." "I can't." Kael shook his head, stepping just slightly closer, enough to make her feel the strength in his presence. "No, you will not face this alone. The burden may be yours, but guidance can be given. I will walk with you, Harper Vale, not to fight for you, but to ensure you do not flee yourself." Harper nodded slowly, a shiver running down her spine, not from fear, but from the gravity of what lay ahead. The forest seemed to hold its breath around them, waiting for her decision. Every snapping branch, every ripple in the river, felt like a silent witness to her resolve. With one final deep breath, Harper swung her leg over the saddle, feeling the weight of years of misdeeds and avoidance settle on her shoulders. The bridge creaked beneath her as she began to cross toward the forest road that led to Red Willow. Kael followed, silent, muscles rippling under sun-darkened skin. A shadow of inevitability at her side. The town awaited. Quiet but watchful, its streets ready to judge, to remember. And perhaps, just perhaps, to forgive. Harper Vale felt a mixture of dread and determination. She had fled for months, but now she understood freedom would not come from escape. Freedom would come from reckoning, and the reckoning had begun. The town of Red Willow looked smaller than Harper remembered, almost fragile against the rising sun that gilded its dusty streets. The wooden storefronts leaned slightly with age, their windows reflecting the light like watchful eyes. Harper's boots crunched on the gravel as she and Kael approached, the weight of every misdeed she had buried pressing down harder than the morning sun. She had imagined this moment. Countless times the confrontation, the judgment, the humiliation, but now that it was here, the air felt thick, heavy with anticipation. Kael walked beside her, silent, his presence a steady anchor, his muscles flexing under sun-darkened skin with every step. The turquoise beads on his jewelry caught the sunlight, flashing like tiny warnings. Harper drew a shuddering breath and kept her gaze forward. At the edge of the square, she saw him first, Jeb Thompson, his broad shoulders stiff, his jaw tight. He had lost half his livestock the winter before, a disaster made worse by Harper's reckless scheming. Now he stood by the general store, arms crossed, eyes dark as storm clouds. Behind him, a few townsfolk lingered, whispers rustling like dry leaves. Each person's face told a story: mistrust, anger, disappointment. Harper felt heat rise in her cheeks and grit her teeth. I came to speak, she began, her voice quivering. Kael's gaze met hers briefly, a silent reminder that running was no longer an option. She stepped forward, trying to summon courage she wasn't sure she had. Jeb's eyes narrowed. Speak? You mean lie your way out again? His tone was low, dangerous, like coiled rope ready to snap. You burned barns, you lied, and you left us to pick up the pieces. Harper swallowed hard. The memories of that winter, of the fire, of her cowardice, pressed against her chest. I know I caused pain, she said, voice barely above a whisper. I didn't understand the weight of my actions, but I do now. I want to make it right. A murmur ran through the gathered crowd. Some scoffed, some stared, waiting to see if she would crumble under their scrutiny. Harper's stomach churned. Each word felt like dragging a blade across open flesh. You want to make it right? Jeb stepped closer, boots scuffing the gravel. Then start by telling the truth. No excuses. No hiding behind fancy words. Kael moved subtly, close enough that his presence steadied Harper. He did not speak, but his quiet authority was palpable, like a silent shield against the judgment of others. Harper took a deep breath, tasting dust and pine in the morning air, and began recounting every detail she had tried to bury: the fire she had caused at the Thompson barn, the lies she had spread to protect herself, the cattle that had died, the nights of fear and despair she had left behind. Her voice wavered, trembling like a candle in the wind, but she did not stop. The town listened, some faces hard, some softened, some eyes wide with disbelief. She felt every gaze as if it were a physical weight, but Kael's calm presence beside her reminded her that she could endure this reckoning. When she finished, silence fell over the square. The river nearby gurgled softly, birds flitted between the rooftops, and for a moment, the town seemed suspended, holding its breath. Jeb's expression softened, not entirely, but enough that Harper dared a cautious glance. You're brave, he said finally, his voice low, measured. I can't say it fixes everything, but facing it is a start. That's more than most would do. Harper let out a shaky breath, relief and fear intertwining. The crowd began to disperse, whispers lingering in the air like smoke. Some still looked doubtful, but a few nodded faintly, acknowledging her courage. It was far from forgiveness, but it was a beginning. Kael's dark eyes met hers, steady, unwavering. "You took the first step," he said. "There will be more. Harder ones. But you have begun to face your deeds." Harper nodded, feeling the first tremor of hope. Her heart still pounded, her hands still shook, but she had confronted her first real test. Red Willow had seen her fail, and now it had seen her try to stand tall. The morning sun rose higher, bathing the town in warmth, but Harper felt a chill of understanding. This was not the end of her reckoning. It was merely the first chapter. The town held her past, her mistakes, and the consequences of her actions, and she would have to navigate them all. But with Kael at her side, she felt a fragile strength, enough to keep moving forward. Harper Vale realized, for the first time, that running away had never been freedom. True freedom came from facing the storm head-on, from standing in the light of judgment and enduring it, and she would endure. Harper Vale moved slowly along the main street of Red Willow, each step a struggle against the gnawing anxiety in her chest. The sun had climbed higher, casting long, sharp shadows from the wooden storefronts onto the dusty street. Whispers followed her wherever she went. Every turned head, every sideways glance reminded her of the fire, the lies, the damage she had caused. The townspeople weren't hiding their judgment, and neither could she hide from it. Kael Thunderhorn walked beside her, bare-chested, his presence a calm but formidable force against the storm of her guilt. His long black hair caught the sunlight, glinting with beads and leather, the tribal jewelry he wore flashing faintly as he moved. He said nothing, but Harper felt his steady gaze on her, a reminder that she could not falter now. They approached the Thompson ranch, charred timbers still smoldering faintly from the fire months before. The smell of ash lingered, and Harper could feel the weight of every action she had avoided facing until now. Jeb Thompson was already there, tending to the few remaining cattle, his face as hard as the boards of his barn. "I didn't come to excuse myself," Harper began, voice trembling. "I came to help. I know words can't undo what I've done, but I want to try." Jeb's eyes narrowed, and his hands tightened on the rope he had been using to secure a gate. "Try? Harper, you've left enough trouble behind already. Don't think a few gestures make this right." Kael stepped slightly forward, the muscles in his chest and arms taut under sun-darkened skin. "Actions, Harper Vale," he said, voice calm but commanding. "Let them see your intent through deeds, not words. Help him. Show the courage to repair what was broken." Harper swallowed hard, nodding. She moved toward the barn, feeling the heat of guilt as she touched the scorched timbers. Her hands were rough and blistered from hauling wood, helping mend fences, and moving feed for the cattle that had survived. Sweat stung her eyes, dust clung to her skin, and the scent of earth and ash filled her lungs. She worked tirelessly under the sun, muscles aching, heart hammering with each act of restitution. The townsfolk watched from the edges of the property. Some murmured among themselves, skeptical of her sincerity. Others seemed quietly impressed by her efforts. Harper felt every pair of eyes on her as if they were measuring not just her work, but her character, her worth, her ability to face the consequences of her past. By mid-afternoon, she paused, hands resting on her knees, sweat dripping from her hairline. Kael approached, his expression unreadable but supportive. "It is hard," he said, his voice low and steady. "But hardship tempers the soul. You are doing what you must, Harper. Do not falter now." Jeb watched her, jaw tight, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes' acknowledgement, perhaps. Harper dared a cautious glance at him, seeing a hint of respect buried beneath the layers of anger and mistrust. It was not forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. As the day wore on, Harper continued to toil. She repaired fences, cleared debris, and helped tend to the sick cattle. Kael stayed nearby, vigilant, occasionally offering guidance on heavy lifting or how to secure the animals safely. Harper noticed that he watched the townsfolk carefully, silently observing their reactions. And she realized he understood the delicate balance between penance and acceptance. When the sun began to dip behind the timber-bird hills, casting long shadows across the ranch, Harper leaned against a post, chest heaving. The work was exhausting, humbling, and painful. Yet there was a strange sense of relief in confronting the consequences she had long avoided. Kael approached. Placing a hand lightly on her shoulder, muscles rippling beneath sun-darkened skin. "You have begun to make amends," he said. "The path is long and not everyone will accept your efforts. But you have taken the hardest step, facing your deeds." Harper nodded, sweat and dust coating her skin, eyes glistening with a mixture of exhaustion and the first glimmer of hope. The sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and the ranch, though battered, looked less like a monument to her failures and more like a place where healing could begin. For the first time in months, Harper Vale felt that her reckoning was not an end but a beginning. The town still held judgment, and the consequences of her actions still loomed large, but she had learned the truth of Kael's words. Freedom would not come from escape. Freedom came from facing the pain, the people, and the consequences head-on, and Harper Vale, though weary and uncertain, was ready to continue walking that path. The sun had barely risen over Red Willow when Harper Vale awoke to the faint scent of smoke drifting from the Thompson barn. She had returned late the previous night, exhausted from the day's labor, and now the soft golden light of dawn cast shadows across the town, turning familiar buildings into something unfamiliar and foreboding. Harper's chest tightened. The work she had begun was only the first step. She knew in her bones that judgment and consequence did not rest with the rising and setting sun. Kael Thunderhern emerged from the shadows of the nearby timber. His bare chest taut and muscular, skin sun-darkened and gleaming faintly with the morning light. The beads and braids in his long black hair swayed gently as he moved, and the silver and turquoise jewelry on his wrists and neck caught the light with a subtle shimmer. He did not speak immediately, but his presence was grounding, a steady anchor amid Harper's turmoil. Harper approached him, voice low and uncertain. "The barn." I don't know if Kael placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "Fear is not weakness, Harper Vale. Courage is not the absence of fear. You will face this as you have faced all else." Together, they approached the Thompson property. Smoke curled faintly from the barn's roof, a reminder of Harper's past negligence. Jeb Thompson was already outside, pacing, jaw tight, eyes dark with frustration and unresolved anger. Several townsfolk had gathered, their murmurs like dry leaves skittering across the dusty streets. Harper swallowed and stepped forward. I'm here to help. I know I can't undo the fire or what I've caused, but I can try to prevent more damage. Please, let me." Jeb cut her off sharply. "Try? That's what you said last time. You left us to suffer while you played clever. Why should I trust you now?" Kael stepped closer, his voice calm but commanding. "Harper Vale does not stand here to deceive. She stands here to act. Actions, not words, will measure her intent." Harper nodded, feeling a surge of determination. She moved into the barn, assessing the damage. The fire had weakened the roof in several places, and charred beams threatened to collapse. Her hands shook as she lifted heavy planks, sweat stinging her eyes and mixing with the dust and soot. Kael followed, offering guidance, steadying her when a beam shifted too suddenly. The townsfolk watched silently, some skeptical, some cautiously hopeful. Harper could feel their judgment in every glance, every whispered word. "Yet you worked tirelessly," knowing that this trial more than any labor was a test of character, of endurance, and of remorse. Hours passed. Harper patched holes in the roof, reinforced beams, and cleared debris from the barn floor. Her muscles ached, her back burned, and her hands were blistered, but she did not stop. Kael remained close, silent support etched into every movement. At one point, she stumbled under the weight of a charred beam, and Kael caught it before it fell. His dark eyes met hers, unwavering. "You endure because you choose to. That is strength, Harper Vale. Never doubt it." By late afternoon, the barn stood sturdier than it had in months, smoke lingering faintly in the air, but nothing threatened to collapse. Harper leaned against a post, chest heaving, and looked up at Kael. "Is it enough?" She whispered. Kael studied the barn, then her, and finally nodded. "Enough to show intent, Harper. Enough to show you are willing to face the consequences of your past. But this is only part of the path. Trials will continue, and your resolve will be tested further." Harper swallowed, the taste of dust and sweat thick in her mouth. She knew he was right. Forgiveness was not guaranteed. Trust was not rebuilt in a single day. Yet the act of facing her deeds, of stepping into the consequences rather than fleeing them, was a victory in itself. The townsfolk began to stir, some offering cautious nods or quiet words of acknowledgement. Harper's heart lifted slightly at the first signs of tentative acceptance. But Kael's voice reminded her that the journey was not yet complete. "Remember this," he said. Voice low and steady, "The path of redemption is long. Harper Vale, each step forward is earned through courage, humility, and persistence. You have begun, but there is still much to endure." As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting red willow in shades of gold and crimson, Harper Vale realized that this trial, the hardest yet, was not just about repairing a barn or earning trust. It was about confronting the parts of herself she had long avoided, facing the pain she had caused, and finding the strength to continue walking forward. No matter how heavy the weight of judgment, with Kael at her side, Harper felt the faint stirrings of hope. She would endure. She would face the trials ahead, and she would confront the shadows of her past until she either earned redemption or understood the full depth of her failure, and the path was just beginning. Harper Vale awoke before dawn, the pale light filtering through the shutters of the small cabin she had rented on the edge of Red Willow. Her body ached from the labor of the previous days, the charred barn, the fences, the relentless work to repair what she had broken, but the weight in her chest was far heavier. It was not exhaustion that kept her awake. It was the fear of confronting the part of herself she had long refused to face. Kael Thunderhorn sat across the room, bare-chested, long black hair cascading over his broad shoulders, tribal jewelry glinting faintly in the morning light. His gaze was unwavering, a silent reminder that she could not escape herself. He did not speak at first. He simply watched, a quiet sentinel, letting her gather the courage to speak. I thought if I worked hard, if I showed them, it would be enough," Harper whispered, her voice raw. "But it's not. It's never enough, is it?" Kael rose, muscles taut under sun-darkened skin, and stepped closer. "The path of redemption is never easy, Harper Vale. Deeds may show intent, but they cannot erase pain. You must look deeper, confront the truth inside yourself, and accept it. Only then can healing begin for you and for those you hurt." Harper swallowed, feeling a lump rise in her throat. She thought of every lie she had told, every selfish act that had left neighbors betrayed or endangered. She thought of the fire at the Thompson barn, the cattle lost, the whispers behind her back, the distrust she had sown like seeds in fertile ground. And she thought of herself clever, untouchable, yet hollow, frightened of facing the person she had become. "I don't know if I can," she admitted, voice breaking. "I don't know if I'm strong enough to face all of it." Kael stepped closer, his dark eyes locking onto hers. Strength is not the absence of fear. Strength is acting in spite of it. You will face this, Harper Vale, not for them, but for yourself. You cannot run from the truth any longer. Harper's gaze dropped to the floor, to the rough wooden planks beneath her boots, as if seeking courage in the earth itself. The room seemed smaller, heavier, filled with the ghosts of every misdeed she had buried. She felt the urge to flee, to run like she had before, but Kael's presence, calm and steady, held her in place. I need to tell them everything, she whispered, voice trembling. Every lie, every mistake. I can't fix it, but I need to own it. Kael nodded, placing a firm hand on her shoulder, muscles rippling beneath sun-darkened skin. Then speak. Speak the truth. Face the judgment. The road will be hard, but this is the only way forward. By mid-morning, Harper and Kael had made their way to the center of Red Willow. The streets were quiet at first, the townsfolk hesitant to gather, sensing that something significant was about to unfold. Harper's stomach churned, each step forward heavier than the last. She could feel every pair of eyes upon her, some filled with suspicion, some with curiosity, some with quiet hope. Harper took a deep breath, drawing the strength she had cultivated through days of labor and reflection. I stand before you, she began, voice wavering, to tell the truth. I caused the fire at the Thompson barn. I lied. I deceived. I left you all to bear the consequences of my selfishness. I cannot undo what I have done, but I will face it. I will make amends. I will endure the judgment I deserve. A hush fell over the square. Harper's eyes scanned the crowd, catching glimpses of the faces she had wronged. Some eyes filled with tears, some with anger, and some softened, tentative bridges forming in the spaces of memory and suffering. Kael remained beside her, silent but unwavering, a living anchor. Harper felt the first tremor of relief, not from forgiveness, but from honesty, from the courage to expose her soul to the light. Jeb Thompson stepped forward, jaw tight, eyes dark but thoughtful. It takes courage to admit wrongdoing, Harper Vale, he said slowly. I won't pretend it undoes everything, but it's a start. Harper nodded, tears welling in her eyes, not of despair, but of the release that came from owning her truth. Around them, townsfolk began to murmur, some nodding, some still skeptical, but none doubting the sincerity in her voice. As the sun climbed high, painting Red Willow in gold, Harper Vale realized that the hardest battle was not physical, nor against others, it was against herself. She had faced the shadows within, admitted the truth, and stood trembling but unbroken. Kael placed a steady hand on her shoulder. You have begun the final steps, Harper Vale. Redemption is a path, not a destination. You walked bravely today. Harper let out a deep, shaky breath, the weight in her chest lightening just enough to see a glimmer of hope. The reckoning was not over, but she had taken the step she had feared most. And for the first time, she felt that perhaps she could endure whatever came next. Harper Vale stood in the fading light of Red Willow, the town quiet now, as if the streets themselves were holding their breath. The sun dipped behind the timber-bird rooftops, painting the sky in hues of amber and crimson, a reflection of the trials she had endured. The confessions of the morning still echoed in her mind, each word a weight lifted, each truth spoken a thread mended in the fragile tapestry of her life. Kael Thunderhern, bare-chested and strong, stood a step behind her. The muscles of his arms and chest taut, long black hair braided with beads and leather cords flowing gently in the evening breeze. The silver and turquoise jewelry he wore caught the last light of the day, glinting like silent witnesses to Harper's journey. He did not speak, but his presence was as steadfast as the earth beneath their boots. Harper took a deep breath, tasting the dust and pine-scented air. The town had watched her, judged her, and in some small ways accepted her efforts. But she knew the hardest test was not over the final confrontation with herself, the ultimate acknowledgement of what she had become and what she had yet to repair. She walked toward the Thompson property, the ranch where so much of her reckoning had begun. Jeb Thompson and a few of the town's elders were there, standing quietly. They had seen her labor, her honesty, and her courage to confront not only them but her own failings. Harper's heart pounded in her chest as she approached, boots crunching on gravel. I want to do more," she said, voice steady though her hands trembled. "I cannot erase the past. I cannot bring back what was lost. But I can continue to help, to make amends where possible. I will work for the trust I've broken, even if it takes the rest of my life." Jeb Thompson's jaw tightened, his eyes studying her face, searching for deception, for weakness. Finding none, he finally nodded. "It's not easy to admit your faults, Harper Vale," he said slowly. "It's harder to act to make things right. You've done both. That is enough to start again." Harper's chest heaved, a mixture of relief and lingering fear twisting within her. Kael stepped beside her, muscles rippling subtly, his dark eyes softening with quiet approval. "You have faced the storm of your deeds," he said, voice low but resonant. "The path ahead is still long, but you have learned to walk it honestly. That is what matters." A gentle breeze stirred through the pines, carrying with it the scent of pine sap and the faint tang of river water nearby. Harper realized that the town, though scarred and wary, had begun to respond to her sincerity. Some villagers nodded in quiet acknowledgement, others offered tentative smiles. It was not complete forgiveness, she knew it might never be, but it was a beginning, and for Harper, beginnings were what she needed most. Kael's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, a grounding presence. Harper met his gaze, gratitude and trust reflected in her eyes. I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You need no thanks," Kael replied, voice steady. "You needed guidance, not salvation. You found the strength within yourself. I only helped you see it." Harper nodded, feeling a calmness settle in her chest. The heavy weight of guilt, the fear, and the shame were still present, but they no longer controlled her. She could face the town, the consequences, and herself. The journey of redemption was not over, but she had taken the most difficult steps. And that was enough for now. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Harper Vale and Kael Thunderhorn stood together, the quiet town stretching before them. The river nearby reflected the colors of the sky, and the trees whispered in the evening breeze. Harper felt a sense of peace she had not known in years, of fragile, precious peace born from truth, effort, and courage. I think I'm ready," she said softly. "Ready to keep going. Ready to face whatever comes next." Kael nodded, the shadows of his powerful form stretching long across the ground. "Then walk forward, Harper Vale. Your past has shaped you, but it does not define you. The future is yours to earn." Harper exhaled slowly, the tension of months of guilt and fear releasing in a long, measured breath. The town of Red Willow, scarred but standing, was witness to her resolve. And for the first time in her life, Harper Vale felt a sense of freedom, not from running, not from hiding, but from facing the truth and walking forward with courage. Together, she and Kael turned from the Thompson ranch, walking side by side into the twilight. The path was uncertain, the road ahead long, but Harper Vale knew she could endure it. She had faced the shadows of her deeds, and now, finally, she could begin to step fully into the light. The town behind them was no longer a prison of guilt. It was a testament to resilience, courage, and the possibility of redemption, and Harper Vale, for the first time, truly believed in both.